So this past weekend, I played in the 2023 Quick Championship here in Salt Lake City. They were a 5-round with a 15-man by 10-second increment games, and this is how I did. So my first game here, I went up against one of the strongest opponents of the tournament. He was a 21, 50 rated player, and I knew going into this that this was going to be a doozy, so I was like, I'm just going to play my best game and go for it. So he starts as white, I'm black, and he goes B3 here, which I have no prep for. So I just go D4 here, trying to get a pawn out in the center. I was like, maybe I'll get these pawns here, block this bishop in. That was kind of my thought process starting off. So I just focused on development, basically. We're just kind of developing, getting our pieces out, making sure that I'm where I need to be. A castle. He goes C4 here, starting to attack my center right away. And I push up to B6 so that if he does push forward, I can just take and be fine. And if he takes here, I think that's fine for me as well. I'm not too worried about a lot of this stuff. I can take with the knight even. Everything is good. He keeps developing, and then I take here, bishop takes F3, thinking that he's gonna start throwing this knight over here, and I'm gonna be definitely losing at this point. He takes the bishop, and I just bring this knight back, looking to plant it over here on F5, which I think is where the more natural square is. Seeing that here, it's not like I can bring it here, and then here, it's like, where's this knight gonna go? So I decided I want to reroute this knight. He goes E4, and now we have this really strong pawn center, and I said, okay, I have to just attack this and not let him attack me. So I take E4 here. He takes with the knight, I take with the knight, he takes with the bishop, and then I push forward here, protecting this rook and pushing this pawn forward to stop any other further advances. So he brings the king forward to attack my king, threatening checkmate here on H7. I just thrust forward, attacking this bishop. The bishop has to drop back, and then I bring this rook out here, looking to get here and start an attack of my own. So he goes H3 here. I go rook to H6. He goes queen to H2, and then I'm like, oh, this pawn right here looks like it's going to be a problem if I let this happen. So I went king to H8, which was a mistake. What I should have done instead is gone queen to C7, setting up this battery on this. So if he comes here after the check, you take here, and then you've really just torn open the king side. But I was afraid that this pawn here was going to lead to him just completely tearing apart my position. So after going king to H8, he chooses to go rook to D1 here. I go knight to G6, bishop to C1, attacking my rook, and I say, hey, cool, let's trade off the bishops, and then I got a nice attack on the queen right away. He goes bishop to E3 here. I go queen to G5, bringing in all the pieces on the attack here. The engine has this about equal, but I feel like I'm definitely have the initiative going forward. He brings the queen over here to F3 to stop any shenanigans. I was thinking maybe I could bring the knight over here on H4 or the rook. What I decided to do is that rook to H4 instead. And what the engine was is none of those two ideas worked best. What was best was bishop takes E3, because then after F takes E3, you bring the knight over here attacking the queen, but also threatening the take here on G2. And so after the queen attacking E2, it's a completely even game at this point. But I went rook to H4, and it kind of messed up my whole position, because you can see here, all these pieces are pretty tangled up on each other. There's not a lot of room for me to breathe or to attack. He brings the rook over here on E1. I bring this over here thinking that, oh, the queen might take here and then start attacking this position. Everything will start to fall apart. He brings the king out of the G1 pin of this pawn, so that this rook take here is not going to happen. And so then I push up into your H6, kind of a waiting move, and that is a blunder, because what you have here is you have G3 forking these two pieces. I take here. He brings back to queen to G2, which means that I'm just kind of out of options either way. I can't protect both. And so I go to protect the rook instead. He takes with the bishop, I take the knight, and then he takes with the pawn there, wanting a queen trade. So I bring it out here, looking to attack the queen here, possibly get the queen trade off, and he brings the king back, obviously looking to trade off all the pieces. So after rook to F8 here, I ran out of time, but he was able to defend my attack and then attack properly. We went into an end game where I think it was all the rooks and the queen was traded off, and he had the extra bishop. It was close to a draw, but I ended up falling in the end. So I lost the first game here to the 2100, which I felt very good with how I played. And so I'm going into the next couple of games here, feeling very confident about my play and thinking that, hey, if I can take this 2100 to the end, I can hopefully pull out some big wins against some big opponents. So in my second game here, I'm playing as white. I'm going up against about a 1100 rated opponent, and I start off with E4, and we go into an Italian structured game with bishop to C5 here. So I go into my pianissimo variation, and it's just a very standard move order. I push up here to a4 looking to attack this bishop because of this, and they blunder by going rook to e8, which invites b4 here. The bishop comes back, you attack a5, and then they trade off this pawn for the bishop, and I am now up 3.5 points. They bring this knight back, which I thought was an odd move. You bring this here, you get this, and there's some sort of attack there, but I just bring my king back, try to get myself out of any danger, and then you go queen to f6 like they were thinking. The thing that I did after that was I went rook to f1 here. One after this knight moves, you have this nice little check here, attacking this king here. And so queen to g6, I went b5 here attacking this knight, figuring it would come here. What I should have done instead is I should have gone knight to h4 here. What that does is it allows this check here. I didn't find that though. And instead I just pushed up here and attacked the knight, and the bishop came here, threatening checkmate here. Then I push knight to h4, attacking this queen. The queen has nowhere to go but to f4 and trade off the queens there. And once that happens, I take the knight, and I still have this nice check here on the king. So after the bishop takes there, I take with the bishop there, the king comes there, and then I go knight to g6, getting the checkmate, easily winning my second game of the tournament. So I'm feeling good after that second round. And I'm going into the third round playing against a 1900 rated player, and he starts off going e4 here. I go c6, he brings the knight over here to c3, and I push up in the center with my typical Caro-Kann structure. We go into the two knights attack, and I thrust the bishop over here to g4. After the pawn attacks the bishop, you take the knight, and after the take back, you push this little pawn structure here, and black is completely fine. They take, and now I have the typical Caro-Kann pawn structure here, and I'm feeling very comfortable in my position. He pushes up to d4, I just continue to developing everything. I'm attacking this pawn here. The bishop comes to attack this knight, and I just castle. Just continuing my development, I'm ahead slightly, and then he castles. I attack this pawn here, thinking, hey, free pawn, but it's really not because the bishop can attack there. So right away, I'm like, dang, I'm now playing behind. I thought I had a nice advantage. I bring the bishop up here to bishop to c5, and he can now attack b4. It's a mistake, but I bring the bishop back anyways because I didn't see where the win was. So he takes there, I drop the queen back, and now I'm just down a piece basically. I have the pawn, but I traded it for a piece. So he's rerouting the knight here, and I go ahead and attack the queen side here with my pawn on a5. He takes, I take with the rook, attacking this bishop, and he just pushes the pawn forward. Completely neutralizing that idea. So I push bishop to c5, looking to get this bishop off the board, and he takes my knight, and that I thought wasn't the best move because, yeah, it damages my pawn structure here, but now I just move this king over, bring this rook, and now I'm really attacking the king side, which is where I want my pieces pointed, because that's kind of where my pieces are going to be going. I just have to get this rook in the game, and I'm looking good. So he then plays this blunder, which gets me back in the game because all I have to do is take it with the queen. The bishop's pinning this pawn, and this is where things started to turn around for me. After this, rook to b1 here, I guess supporting this bishop. I just move my king out of the way, looking to point my rook here at the king. He goes and attacks my queen, so I have to just drop it back. I'm looking to get it here and possibly take this h3 pawn in the future. The queen comes out over here to d2, eyeing my rook here. So I just bring the rook back, and then the king comes over here to h1, and I just get this rook in position to strike. Rook to f3 here, looking to, I guess, attack this pawn, so I just push the pawn up. Queen to c3, checking my king, and I just offer the queen trade instead. What I should have done is just bring the bishop over here to d4. The queen would have to come over here to c7, but I didn't like the attack here on this f6 pawn. I didn't really want that to happen. So I offer the queen trade, he takes, and now we have a slightly equal position. I'm up a pawn though. I have to worry about this pawn and this bishop that is cemented on my queen side, and he goes to attack my bishop, so I just bring the bishop back. He goes rook to b1, I cement my bishop here, and we're just kind of jockeying for a better position. He strikes it in the center here. We take, and I'm up another pawn, so things are looking good for me. He gets the king over here, and I just start working on trying to get these pawns here. He brings this bishop back, which I'm like, great, I just trapped my freaking rook. That could be a problem. So I'm pushing this pawn forward, looking to attack this bishop. He just drops this bishop all the way back, and then I push up to f5, just trying to get my passed pawns rolling. He pushes up here to f3, and I go to h5. He comes to attack my king, and I'm like, dang, I've just threw away the whole freaking pawn over here on h5, moving the king. But then he moves back over here to b1, looking to attack this pawn. And I thought that was really weird. So I just continue to push forward, and then he pushes here, looking to attack this pawn, so I solidify that here. And then he pushes forward, allowing this passed pawn here. I then throw a check on the king comes back, I take the pawn, and then he takes this pawn with checks. I'm like, crap, am I gonna let this advantage slip away? But I'm pretty comfortable because I have the 2-pawn advantage. I bring the king back, and that's where my notation ends. We're running low on time. I ended up just grinding out this endgame and getting the win, and finishing 2-1 defeating a 1900, I felt very good about that. And I'm going into the next game thinking, hey, I can make some serious improvements for my elo here. So after playing the 1900, I'm now playing against about an 1850 rated player, a guy that I've played in a couple other tournaments before. And I know that as white, he likes to play Sicilian. So we go into like an Alpine Sicilian, and he goes knight to f6 here. And the last time I played him, I went queen to f3 here, which is not the best move. The best move here is actually going e5. He goes knight to d5, and I just play knight to f3, which is around close to a top engine move. And he brings his other knight out, and I just complete the pawn chain here. He takes, and I take with a knight thinking, oh, we'll just trade knights and I'll have a strong pawn center. Completely forgetting that you can just take the pawn here. So he gets the pawn back. He has the 2 strong center pawns, which gives him, I think, the advantage out of this. The engine agrees with the 1 point advantage. I go bishop to e2, just looking to get my castle king. He moves knight to f7, I castle, and he goes e6. I then pin the knight to the queen here. He goes bishop to e7, I go rook to e1, he castles, go knight to d2, just developing my pieces, and then he goes knight to g6 here, bringing his knight back. I'm not understanding exactly where he wants to go with this knight, so I just start bringing my pieces over to the king side. The whole theme of this tournament is I'm just trying to get my pieces over to the king side and good things just happen there. So he pushes b6 here, and I just better position my bishop to attack this king. The bishop comes here, eyes my knight, and I push forward here. He thought that was a mistake because after taking there, I then get the rook in the game, and I'm looking to get it in the vicinity of attacking the king. He pushes, attacks my rook. And now I'm looking to swing it over here on h6. He goes h6, I trade the knights off, and I go over here to attack this pawn here. The pawn comes back, and I just reroute my knight. So this bishop is now cut off from any help from his king side, which I thought was really good. And he goes to attack my knight. I push the knight away, and he attacks my rook, so I just moved away. I was like, cool, take this pawn. I now have some good attacking chances on his side of the board. He goes bishop to g5, stopping this rook from attacking the king. And then I go queen to g4 here. What I should have done instead was I should have gone h4, attacking this right away. But instead I went queen to g4, attacking the bishop. And then he attacks with the bishop here on the knight on f3. This is completely fine because I just push h4, then attacking the bishop. The bishop has to, come back to f5. He decides to attack instead. And that just helps me out because I think I'm going to take this bishop, and now I'm eyeing here. And I got a lot of pieces pointed at the king side. He still has to move this bishop away, which he does to f6. I then go queen to h5 here. So after he attacks there, I don't even take the bishop back. I just go full bore into attacking this pawn, because what happens is if he decides to take my rook, you have checkmate here, and the queen can't come out to help on either of these squares. So I take here on h6, and he pushes forward, and then I go with the rook sacrifice, which gives me a brilliant from chess.com. I thought it was the easiest move to find to get this checkmate, and he resigns from here. And so I've beaten a 1900 and an 1850 in this open tournament, and I'm going into the 5th round playing for 2nd place and hoping that I can bring home a big elo, return for me. My opponent here, who's white, I'm black. And the last time we played a Samish variation of the King's Indian defense, and he completely crushed me. So I didn't want to get into that again. He goes d4, I go d5, and I'm looking to get into a Slav defense, basically. So we take, I'm just developing my pieces, get my bishop over here to g4. He goes e3, I bring my knight out here to c6, and I'm kind of in a Carl Khan structure for the most part. And so he brings in this bishop on e2, I go e6, he castles, I go bishop to d6, just developing my pieces. He goes h3, forcing the bishop trade there. I'm castled, and now I'm fully developed, and now it's like, what do I do from here? So he pushes h3, stopping any of these shenanigans. I push over here on a6, and we just completely lock down the queen side for the most part. He brings the bishop over here, and I thought that was a silly move because it's just eyeing a pawn here. And I bring the queen here, setting up a battery with this bishop. He goes queen to e2, and I bring the rook to the open file. I'm having a hard time figuring out how I'm gonna get my pieces into the game here. Most of my pieces are here on the queen side, so I'm gonna try to figure out how to barge through there. Rook f to d1. I go knight to e7, trying to get my knight over here on f5, and he prevents that. So I take with the pawn, and the long-term disadvantages of taking this is you push this pawn here and the bishop comes alive, right? So he takes with the knight, I take with the knight, he takes with the bishop, and then he's eyeing my rook, so I move my rook over here to a7. What I should have done instead was I should have gone knight to d5, stopping the advance of this pawn, but also blocking this bishop. That's what I should have done. The nice thing is in this position too, it opens up the rooks, and I got a centralized knight that is not going to be bothered by any pawns, and he's going to have to trade off the bishop for that. But I didn't do that. I went rook to a7 instead, just completely looking at trying not to throw my rook. I'm looking at doubling up here on c7. And he pushes forward, bringing alive this bishop, and there's going to be some attacks coming my way. So I take with the d5 pawn, thinking that, hey, I'm attacking this bishop, and then I completely forget that the rook's kind of defending it. But he brings in this queen over here to g4 anyways. I go bishop to e5, looking to block this bishop from, you know, obviously checkmating me. We trade those off, and now I'm eyeing this rook. He takes there. I can't take here because you have the checkmate here. So so he gets the free pawn. I double up the rooks here, allowing it so that I could take here because he can't just take this rook. He goes bishop to f3. I bring out the rook over here and attacking the queen. And that allows the queen to kind of infiltrate here on d7, threatening checkmate here. So I have to bring the queen back. We trade off the queens. And it's completely even this position, but I have some big weaknesses here. And the weaknesses are my pawns over here on the queen side. And he exploits it right away by going d6. Things aren't looking good for me. So I go ahead and attack the rook. He takes the pawn, and I just try to centralize his knight, try to attack any way I can, but I'm not able to really put up much of an attack. Try to bring the queen in the game. I trade off these rooks, but I still just can't get my pieces involved. And so after moving here, I go to attack this pawn. He brings the rook back, looking to hit me there and steal this pawn later. I try to just move this h6 pawn out of the way, and he takes this g7 pawn. I take this a3 pawn. He goes to attach the h6 pawn. I go to attack b4. We trade these pawns off, and I have like this pass pawn here, but he has this nice pawn-sided majority here on the king side that's gonna be really hard for me to stop. And he starts attacking right away. He attacks my pawn over here on g5, and I'm like, oh, I'll let him take, and I have good pieces here. He brings his king over to protect there, and then I figure now's the best time to take that, and I have to just push this pawn up and, you know, try to defend these two advanced pawns. But with these two pieces here, it's gonna be really hard for me to do that. My rook is kind of out of the game. Its main job is just to pin this pawn, and I'm bringing this queen over here to try to attack here. So he goes here and I go here, and that completely ends the game for me because you have the rook fork here, losing the knight, and the game is over at this point. We play a couple more moves, but at this point, I say, screw it, you're probably winning. I will just resign. And so I finished tournament 3 and 5, which isn't like too crazy, but the fact of the strength of my players was basically 1800 and above. I think the average was in the 1900s. I feel like I played very well and above my pay grade. And so you can see here, the 2023 Quick Championship, my rating went from 1360 to 1485. So that's a 125 point increase in ELA rating. I'm pretty stoked about that result. And so I'm going into my next tournament. That's probably going to be in about a week. It's going to be a much smaller tournament, so I'm looking to continue improving on my rating. That video will be here, and I'll see you next time.